How did you
Hey,
stumble
Michael.
across the Colorado tap room on this lovely afternoon?
It says relax, you're on mountain time. No, I'm here because I started out the morning at a senior networking event called Coffee and Collaboration. And before I had a meeting with a realtor who specializes in senior transitions right after that we scheduled to do here because we both knew we were going to be here. And then somebody else was talking to me for a while, but I just ended up staying because I had calls scheduled from noon until 3 o'clock, including you. So
We'll take
this
it.
is this is I'm not drinking yet, but this is my messy busy happy hour drink. It's a iced chai coconut latte.
Well, cheers. I was definitely thinking like,
Cheers.
oh, do I need to go upstairs and find our where our Kahlua is? Like, is how seriously do I need to take this, right?
Yeah, so that's my drink right now for our happy hour.
Nice.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Busy, busy, but like I'll always take busy,
Yeah.
busy.
So I want to share right away the call that I just got off of.
Okay.
Um, it was with the rep from Prairie Mountain Media. Prairie Mountain Media
They're the ones that do aging and
owns the
altitude,
Daily,
right?
right, and they own the Daily Camera. And we had this call set up so that I could look at some more ad options and things like that because, as you know, I've been pretty successful with aging at altitude, which, for those who might be listening to this, it happens twice a year in Boulder, spring and fall. There's, several, I don't know how many vendors, maybe 75 or 100 vendors that fill up the Boulder JCC gymnasium, and then they have speakers, presenters. I've been one of them for quite a few years now, and I decided this time around that given all of the advocacy that I try and do, that Boulder's my community, just like it's your community. I don't know how long you plan on living here, but I will go out kicking and screaming. I'm not leaving here, but that means I'm aging here. And that means that there needs to be reasonable options for senior living for me as I continue to age. And there just aren't, as we know. There just aren't in Boulder. And it's a problem around the country.
It's a problem around the country, and
Right,
all the people that I follow, they're like, if you're going to start a business, you should start one that's catering to the baby boomers who are aging
right,
because they're living longer than ever, and we need more space and more activities and more services.
right,
And most people who are retired don't want to like DIY things anymore. So,
right.
yeah, I would imagine that, especially in Boulder, if you have millions and millions of dollars, you're probably fine. And if you're like us common folk, it is harder to find and harder to get into. And just
Yeah.
like you're taking an already small community and making it smaller and tighter and harder to get into.
Right. So, one of the things that, I have been trying really hard through all of my work is to make our community understand that there are people really struggling. I mean, the statistics right now are that by 2030, all the baby boomers will be 65 and over, right? By
Hmm.
2040, there's going to be over 80 million people over 65. What are we going to do with all those people? They can't all afford these mega luxury senior living communities in Florida and Texas and California.
Hmm.
Um, but in Boulder right now, truly the only option, there's one option. I'm not going to name it. It's not a great option. Um, but it's not even assisted living anymore. It's just independent living. And if that is the only option for people who don't have the means to live in assisted living and they can't get Medicaid and all the hoops that people have to jump through to get affordable senior housing, it's really scary. It's very, very scary. So I was just talking to this woman from Prairie Mountain Media, and I have been pushing for them to do a panel at the spring Aging at Altitude to discuss this because it's a very, very, very important issue. And not only, through aging at altitude, but also through my relationship with the Boulder Chamber and my relationship specifically with John Taylor, the president of the chamber. I had a conversation with him and a woman that I recently got introduced to who I think it was through the Neurodiversity Expo that I did, the Next Steps Expo. We met and then we started talking, and she's a grant researcher and writer. And I'm like, I really need to get you inserted into a conversation that I'm planning on having with John about the future for seniors in our community and see maybe how you can work with the Boulder Chamber, because as you know, the Boulder Chamber is all about policy and advocacy. And yes, there's plenty of networking and all of that that's going on, but where they are really important to our community because of the work that they do, especially at the Capitol
Yeah,
and
well, and
within the
that's
city of Boulder itself.
yeah, and it's totally in line with how Boulder operates. It's like
Great.
all well and good to make those connections, and like don't get me wrong, like that is any chamber does that, and so I'm sure Boulder does that very well. And
Right.
Boulder is full of advocates. Boulder is full of activists. Like there are so many elements where people want it's not more or extra, but it's different. It's,
Yeah.
deeper, whatever
Yeah.
whatever that is for you and your Boulder connection.
Right. Right. So, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this panel will happen, and I'm very excited about it. I really am. And I made it really clear to the people at Prairie Mountain Media, this is not a money grab situation for me. This is because this is my heart. Like, this is truly where my heart is, and I want my legacy to be this. I don't want to just keep hustling and grinding just to pay my bills and not feel like I'm making a difference in the world overall. And, if I can only do it in my little corner of the world here in Boulder, great. I will die happy. I will. I really will. And I mean that. I really do.
Yeah. How often do you think about like legacy? Because I have that conversation with myself all the time of, okay, and so much of it is perspective. In some ways, I'm like, oh, I do a lot of copying and pasting and, click, click, click on computer screens and whatnot
Yeah.
that just like anyone could do. And then doing those same tasks, I could also say that I'm like helping people grow their businesses and work for themselves and figure
Absolutely.
out. And I know that it's the latter. I know that that's what I'm doing. But
Hmm.
it's so important and nice to have that the bigger picture,
Right.
that like zoom out effect.
But I think that maybe you take it a step further than maybe a lot of digital creators do, because you do have heart. I know you do because we've known each other a long time. And you take your role very seriously, just like I do. And I can tell in, what is it now, over a year that we've been working
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
that you really want to dig deep into what I am doing. And I know that you like really take this seriously. It's not just fluff out there. It's not just making pretty pictures to, entice people to hire me. It's more the heart and the real, grit of what is going on in the world, and especially with seniors, not just seniors but everybody, of course, but seniors is really where, and it always has been my soft spot. It really has, because as I've said repeatedly in many conversations that I've had, both online, in this kind of format, I had a really close relationship with my grandparents, and I am a different person, I think, because of it. I think I would have been completely different had I not been. And I'm listening to a podcast right now called Century Living. I can't remember. I think his name might be Kenneth Stern or Sternberg. I saw him on LinkedIn last week, and I'm like, and he's involved in some sort of longevity project. And I'm going to reach out to him, maybe to do one of these, little messy, business happy hours. Doesn't roll off my tongue yet.
You'll get
um,
there.
I'll get there. But he does a podcast called Century Living, And the podcast that I'm listening to right now while I was driving to my location this morning is about these senior living communities around the country. But they started off talking about those mega ones down in Florida, like Sun City, and there's like a Margaritaville themed one, and another one called Water Sound. I don't know, like whatever. Um, but these are not cheap. And while they have, provide this amazing lifestyle for seniors that 55 and up, not everybody in this country is ever going to be able to afford it. I think that they mentioned the starting home is 350. Well, on the surface, that still may not sound like a lot, but to somebody like me who can't even pay the down payment at this point in my life, I'm not eligible. I'll never be eligible for one of those.
And
But
also,
then,
it's the house, but
go
then
ahead.
it's all what are all those other fees that are tacked on for the
And
services?
I don't
Which,
want to take care of a house.
right, exactly.
I don't want to take care of a house. So then they moved up to Maine,
Okay.
somewhere in Maine. There's a place called, I think it's the Gorman House. And what's so cool about this is that it's a senior living home, um, but they have a preschool on their property, and they engage the kids with the seniors ongoing, right? And I remember when I lived in Tampa, the JCC preschool where my kids went, it's well known I'm Jewish, but they went to the JCC preschool because, it was just a great preschool. Even if we weren't Jewish, I probably would have sent them there. But it was right next door to an assisted living community. So there was a lot of, the kids would go over to Weinberg Village and do their Shabbat there on Friday mornings. And the seniors, would all sit around and laugh and dance. And some of them would get up and sing with the kids. I mean, what better thing could you possibly ask for,
Yeah.
right? So this place in Maine, they were talking to the woman who runs it and said that they have done studies. They followed these kids from preschool into their primary years, and historically now they have data showing that those kids who go to that preschool are more compassionate, more empathetic, more inclusive.
Hmm.
I can't think of a better thing.
No,
Like, how could we not duplicate that all over the United States, right? So
well,
now, of course, you
it's
know what I'm going to do. I'm now going to be campaigning for that in Boulder.
well, and it's solving. It's like there's a few elements that just like solve problems that are just not giving any daytime, any daylight. Uh,
Right,
you're addressing both the senior issue and the childcare issue, which are both real challenges, especially in our country.
right,
And this like connection to something bigger than yourself, connecting to other
right.
generations, which has just kind of, I don't want to say it's gotten lost because it's so dependent on that's like a
Oh, it
family
has gotten
thing.
lost.
But I feel
It
like, yeah,
has.
we used to get that in school. And I mean, how many times did we have pen pals or family tree
Right.
projects? And I just think that that's kind of a lost art. And so, how great that we can provide a
You know why?
service that also like builds up that sentiment in families. Why?
The reason why we don't have that anymore is because we become an educational system based on test scores. And that's all that matters. That's it.
No, I
That's
get
it.
it. Well,
And
and
we're
we're
not even
so
doing a good job at that.
And look,
We
we're
suck at that.
also very individualistic. You know, part of it is the birth of technology, and you can get the feeling of community without necessarily needing to be in community. Part of that is like, we're both Jewish, but religion is not, religion as a whole is not doing great. But really, I was just listening to something that was talking about this. Um, Religious beliefs aside, the act of gathering in community around prayer, around celebration, rites of passage, that's the kind of thing that, like, if that
Right,
gets lost, we're really going to lose our ways.
right,
And you need the
right,
physical spaces
right,
to do that.
right, right. It's interesting because, and I don't know if my daughter will be happy about me talking about this, but she's getting married next. Well, she is technically married. She went to the courthouse in November, And I will ask her permission if I can include this in a messy business happy hour. um, she they and she called me in advance and said, this is what we're doing, I hope you're okay with it. And I'm like, of course I am. I don't care. I really do.
Mhm.
Just be happy. That's all that I ask for. But I will say, there was a tiny little bit of me when she said that were not going to they might not even have a ceremony when she does finally have the wedding weekend in January of next year. There was a little tiny bit of me that was like, wow, there's going to be no traditions.
Mm.
There's really not going to be any traditions. And I have to, I have to be okay with it because this is her wedding. This is her marriage. When I got married, I don't know about you, but when I got married the first time in the 80s, I called my parents. I said I got engaged. They're like, okay. Next day, my mother was on the phone with the country club and made all the arrangements. And she called the synagogue and made sure the rabbi that I wanted was going to be available to come do the ceremony. And that was that. Like I didn't really have much say in it. And honestly, I really didn't need any say because I just wanted the celebration. I really did. But I enjoyed the traditions. I did embrace getting married under a chuppah. I did embrace, smashing the glass. I did embrace the hora. But, you know, those were just things that were still relatively important, I think, 40 years ago. I don't think that kids today care as much about those things. It doesn't matter to them, and that's okay. But it still feels like there's something that just might be missing. And and
Yeah.
and
Well, I think you raised a good term of tradition. And I think the idea of tradition is far more important than the actual tradition itself. Sometimes
right.
those are what connects us to our ancestors.
Tradition, tradition.
Exactly. Often that is like a familial thing, and you want
Right,
your offspring to follow those. But
right,
we just had this conversation in our house of like, okay, like these traditions don't really mean anything to us,
right,
or like, why are we doing this if no one likes doing this? But then the
right,
conversation went to like, how do we make our own traditions?
right.
And I think that
And
the
that's what I told her. I told her, just
yeah,
make your own traditions, and that's fine. We're not walking her down the aisle.
mhm.
I don't. I think they're going to have an officiant, but it's not going to be a religious officiant. And again, fine, totally fine. But it is weird. It's just weird, because I have to get through this to accept that the world has changed. It
Yeah.
has. And
If it's
and
any
I
consolation,
embrace change. I do embrace change,
we have to.
but yeah, 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 totally. I mean, listen, I had to learn, my brain was not wired when computers were coming out. We were not wired for computer life, my generation. My kids, though, that's how they were born and raised. They don't know any different. It's been like this ever since they were 8 years old, right? So, I'm trying my best. And what's interesting is that having all the senior clients that I have, having to backpedal a little bit and away from thinking that everything can be digital for them or online for them. you know just before we had this conversation, I was trying to send a text message to a client. Well, the number they gave me was a landline. I don't know anybody that has landlines.
And we just talked about that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, if it's any consolation, my wedding sounds much like what your daughter's is going to be. We
and
had
it's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
and you
fine.
know what? In the when we first kind of laid out the plans, my family was like very against that, very against it. Um, and by the end, we had one of our close friends as the officiant. It was a very intimate ceremony. And I feel like every person that was like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Like, that doesn't seem like us. And like, that doesn't, they all came up and they were like, that was so touching. That was so
Right.
meaningful. Like, I'm so glad
Yeah.
that you did this and you stuck to your guns.
Right.
Like, that was, so I think that as long as we're open to it. So I have a question. Um, let's bring this full circle. If if it's the traditions and the community and like the rites of passage that ultimately are what make us feel connected, how as you're like going through a project, especially with like a senior who's like maybe they're downsizing or right sizing, maybe they're just like getting rid of some of their stuff. How do you like, are you looking for some of those things? Because ultimately the answer is not just throw it all out. Get rid of all of it.
Right.
Let's bring in the dump truck. Let's bring in, been there, dump that, and we'll tag them right there. And let's do this. I think it's got to be more of looking for those things so that they feel like that's not your MO.
Right. You know what? I wish that I could pull up quickly this photo and I will obviously send it to you and you can insert it here where you think it's appropriate. It was a crystal little sculpture that I
Mhm.
posted on Facebook. A client who happens to be Jewish, he handed it to me last week when I did the consult and said, do you think there's anybody that you could, do you want this or do you, and I said, I personally don't. I don't need things anymore. I don't want things anymore, but I will be happy to find it a good home. And it's just this little sculpture with a tiny little Jewish star right in the center. But the way that the crystal was cut, I think it's like one of those like Eastern European things from 40 or 50 years ago that was very popular at the time. And it creates like multiple images of the Jewish star that, you know, like a prism kind of thing. And I have several people, I put it out on Facebook and I said, all right, I'll do a drawing. Anybody that, you know, anybody that's interested, I'll do a drawing. Well, it turned out one of my cousins saw it and he lives in South Denver. And, you know, part of me wants to give it to him because he's my cousin, but I have to be fair, right? You know, I'll do the drawing and whoever wins, wins. Um, but he also had tefillah and which is, you know, the prayer shawls, and he had some prayer books and some yarmulkes. And he's like, you know, do you think anybody in the Jewish community here will want this? I'm like, I'm certain I can find somebody in the Jewish community that wants it. You know, and so it is my pleasure to you know send those forward if there's somebody out there that really wants it, whether or not it then you know makes it you know into the next 100 or 200 years, I don't know, but somebody's going to derive joy from it for the next however many years. Great, it doesn't end up in the landfill, you know.
Yeah. No, I think that's so much of it is like we're constantly in this tussle of like letting go of things versus holding on to things. And whether those are physical things or emotions,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. You're constantly in that cycle of how you're feeling about that. And
Right.
that is tied in with the traditions, with the ceremonies,
Right.
all of that stuff with your
Right.
family. And
Right.
so it's, you constantly have to find the balance of, okay, like this is a thing I can let go of. And
Right.
I would have to imagine that like we probably wouldn't like donate like to fill into like Goodwill. But
No.
but if you know that it's going somewhere where it's going to be appreciated and used and loved, you feel so much better about letting
So
go.
much better. Yeah. Yeah. For
Um,
sure. For
I
sure.
was just I was just talking about this with Katie of like um like tying it in like Boulder, there's more services here, which means there's more nonprofits. Like I think Boulder has one of the highest like per capita nonprofit.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So like as the death and dying industry becomes more needed because these baby boomers continue to get people in general get older, not just the baby boomers, they don't get to keep that as their own. Um,
Yeah.
but as people continue to age, it's both a need and a like the supply and demand is both here in Boulder of I want to know that my stuff is not going to be a burden to my children, B, not just going to end up in Goodwill or a landfill, and
Right.
C, that like if I know it's going to a good cause, whether that's that it's going to be used or that the donations are going to support something that I believe in, I'm going to feel so
Right.
much better about letting go. It's going to give
Right.
me like the freedom and the flexibility to let it go with compassion, with levity, with, dare we say, a bit of humor.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm.
No, and that is truly my ultimate goal is to make sure that things are honored as they should be, as
Mhm.
much as possible. Just like, you know, I might have told the story during the Nick Fox interview that we did from the Millennial Inheritance. That I had a client once that the mother had had a stroke, went into rehab. They thought that she was eventually gonna end up in assisted living, and then she died. And so the storage unit where they had been storing everything for 6 months, very quickly they had to move her out, get everything out. They knew she was never going to go back to where she had been living, but then she dies, and the family's like, we've already gone through everything, but we don't want what's left to just go into a landfill. And this was a huge storage unit. It was, the biggest one that they had. And we intentionally set up, and it was during the pandemic. It was the week between Christmas and New Year's. We literally pulled the door down on that storage unit on December 31st at 3 p.m. Because I had the junk guys come at the very end to haul the rest away. But we had people for 4 days coming into that storage unit with masks on because it was the pandemic. And they could take whatever they wanted, right? And we just asked that if they could make a donation to the Alzheimer's Foundation, which was the charity of choice for that family, that would they please. And so a lot of people did. And it was so like, it's not money that I made. It's not money that the family got back. It was a pay it forward in the most beautiful of ways, right? That's all that I could ask for, is that we continue to do that as best as we possibly can. Um, I hope, that would always be my hope. And I get it. Some people, like I do have the client right now, that, is having, at first he wanted to have both a garage and like kind of an estate sale. He just doesn't have enough to be an estate sale. So I convinced him, just take the stuff from your house and put it in the garage and do it in one day. And whatever you make, you make. And then after that, it goes, wherever you decide it goes to. And he's like, you know what, you're right. He's like, I'm gonna make myself crazy to make what, a couple $100? Like, is it really worth it? And I'm like, only you can decide that. You're the only person that can make that decision. I can advise you, I can tell you, I personally wouldn't do it. It's not worth giving up a beautiful Saturday to sit in a garage and make a couple $100. But is that fair for me to say that to every single person? Because everybody's needs are different.
Yeah.
Could that $200 change the trajectory of my life? No, absolutely not. But could it be the difference for a week of groceries for somebody? Yeah, it could. It absolutely could.
Could it be the thing where they say, okay, I'm going to like declutter and get rid of all of these things in my life to get this one thing that's genuinely meaningful? Not that it's like replacing stuff with other stuff, but it could be an experience. It could be like,
Right.
hey, before like we're gonna do this, and then as a family, we're all gonna go out to eat and we're all gonna share our like two favorite stories of childhood. Like there's so many
Yeah.
ways that you can like make that
Right.
a meaningful and touching experience.
That's why I was working well, I mean, on top of the fact there was the demand to work 6 or 7 days a week throughout the fall this past year. I also justified it as, okay, well, if I do this, then I can justify going to New Mexico like I did between Christmas and New Year's. I can go to Steamboat over Thanksgiving. I can go to the French Quarter Jazz Fest in April. Like, this is why I work as hard as I do. And people say, well, you're going to make yourself sick. I'm like, maybe, as I was these last 2 weeks. But at the same time, it's what I have to do to feel comfortable having that time to have my experiences. I really do. I work
I
hard to play hard.
I agree. And I think that we all need to take a line out of that and say, what's the pile of things that we need to get rid of? Because everyone would do better if we all went to Jazz Fest at least once.
Well, it's not it's
Have,
not the Jazz Fest, it's the French Quarter Fest. Sorry.
is that
It's
the
the
one
week
that's the
before.
one that's in like the center of
In the
Normandy?
quarter. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's the way to do it. It's like
It's free. It's free.
it's free. Yeah, we did that. I don't know if it was the Jazz Fest, but it was some music festival that was like in and amongst the French Quarter. And it was on my brother's bachelor party. And it was just celebrations
Yeah.
everywhere. Just
Yeah.
like I remember doing this, like, oh, do I like that music or that music more? Okay, I think we should go that direction. And it was just as simple as that. Everyone needs an experience like that.
It's kind of how I felt being at the Longmont Walkabout this past weekend,
Mhm.
which was, it's a great community event, a bunch of different venues, having a bunch of different artists, different genres. And I still was not feeling 100%. So I was very low key this year at that event. I was not up and dancing the whole time. There were a couple of beautiful, beautiful performances at the Trailhead Church, which is right on Main Street.
Okay.
If you've never been in there, it's this teeny tiny little one room chapel with beautiful acoustics. And, you know, I thought that I was going to fall asleep if I sat, but I was so mesmerized sitting there. It was beautiful. It was
Mm.
absolutely beautiful. So, um, you know, I don't know how we got on that subject. Oh, experiences. Taking, should I have been home working until later in the day? Maybe, maybe. I don't know, but I needed a break from being sick and sitting in my house all week long. I just needed to get out and be part of the world again.
Oh, totally. No, and again, like I feel like, it's not this is not your life's work. But it is an element of it of trying to get people to realize that the stuff isn't what's important. The experiences are what's
Yeah,
important. The
yeah,
relationships are what's important. I
yeah,
could look back on all of the crap that I've gotten over the last couple years, which like, especially with a young kid, it's a lot. It's a lot.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but like, I don't think I got one souvenir on that trip to New Orleans. At this point, that was over
I don't need it. Yeah,
12 years ago, 15 years ago, it was something like that. Yet I could do this and that to my brother and he would know exactly what I'm talking about and we would bring it up. And there's like two or three other things of like moments when we were like just
yeah,
just fully present.
yeah,
And that's more valuable than any
yeah.
piece of technology or souvenir or anything.
Right. I don't know if you got a chance to read the blog that will be published on Valentine's Day. And you and I talked a little bit about that last week, because I want to say I was struggling, but you really, really honed it in for me and advised me, what I could write about, which was the 5 lessons I've learned in the last 5 years since relaunching and rebranding this business. And I wrote it kind of as a love letter to myself and I'm really proud of it.
Good.
But one of the 5 things was about community. How important building my community has been, and I knew that long ago, but even more so in the last 5 years. Much, it's really been so important to me to be part of these little sub communities within my bigger, larger community, like the neurodiversity community, the senior community, the mental health. Well, mental health falls under neurodiversity, but it's so important to me to feel like the people I'm serving, I really, really, really understand their community, and
Mhm.
I think I've done a pretty good job at that. I really do.
But I think you're probably not giving yourself enough credit of the amount of work that you put towards that and the energy that you put
Thank
towards that.
you.
Both in like putting yourself out there, but also creating spaces
Right.
for others and helping others see
Right.
the value of that.
Right. And when you say the word legacy, like this is what I want, I hope my legacy will be, it's not about ego. Because I think a lot of people, unfortunately we live in the world that we live in today, right? Where, we're dealing with the billionaire ego mindset. And again, it's none of this is a money grab for me because trust me, I'm supporting myself to some degree, but I am by no stretch of the imagination wealthy. And I've said this, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. I may not be rich in terms of my bank account, but I have a very rich life. And I know it because I built it and I've worked hard to have that rich life, where I can, walk into practically any place now in Boulder County and I know somebody. And that's really, really, really important to me because when I need my community, they help me because I've helped them. I've built those relationships, those connections.
It's so funny you say that. I completely 1,000% agree that like that's the people that show up for you that you can vent with, that you can celebrate with. All of that's true.
Like you
Yeah.
have showed up for me in the past year
Well,
more than I could have ever imagined,
oh, thank
like
you. That's so sweet.
I mean we're doing this and it's all part of
Yeah.
what you charge me on a monthly basis, but it's way above and beyond any other marketing person that's ever helped me, way above and beyond, and you know how much I appreciate it.
I
I
do.
hope
I
you do.
do. I do. And
Yeah.
and I do very appreciate that. And I feel that way too. It's part of why I also don't want to leave the Boulder area of like I not only do I have a community here, do I have a sense of belonging, but that I, I built that myself. No one can be like, oh, well, you're Josh's brother, or you're Harvey's kid, or you're whatever. Like, so of course you're gonna
Right.
be here. It's like I came here knowing zero people, and now
Me
I
too.
also run into that where like when I'm out in public, I often bump into someone that I know, much to the chagrin of my daughter, who we were
Right.
at Costco last week, and I bumped into someone, actually it was from the JCC community. And I was like, hey, like, I need to go say hi to that person. Like, I haven't seen them in so long. And she goes, every time we come to Costco, you always
Right.
see someone you know. And I'm like, you should be so lucky, Zoe.
Right, right. Well, my kids used to get upset with me when we would go into like any place in Tampa and I would just start talking to people. And they're like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because you never know. You never
No.
know. You never know. I am that person that if I sit on a plane and somebody wants to talk to me, I want to talk to them, you never know. You never know where it all might lead. You just don't.
No.
I was on a hike a couple weeks ago and I don't date often, but this was a first date, and I ran into three people that I knew. And he's like, and do I want to be running into people when I'm on a first date? Probably not, but it's open space. I can't stop anybody from being out there. But it was just so funny. He's like, "Do you know everybody in this town?" I'm like, "I know a lot of people."
I told all my friends, be at Sanitas at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Let me know what you think of this dude.
Anyway, I know that we didn't exactly cover any transitions or anything like that, but I still think this was a really,
I think this was
really impactful conversation.